All right.
Hello, sorry to be late.
Hello and welcome at this panel discussion, future-looking discussion on what will citizen engagement look like in post-COVID times. My name is Nora. I'll be your moderator today, and while we wait for attendees to join us, I'm just going to summarize what you can expect from this session. So this is a future-facing session. We know that there are big issues post-COVID, brought by COVID, and issues that existed before. And our purpose here is to examine how citizens can have their voices heard, notably at EU level, in the post-COVID times. We're going to hear from the panelists who are here today what is planned and what is possible in terms of citizen participation. And one thing that makes this discussion, I think, extremely urgent and topical is that as several crises collide in health, in climate, in the economy, a crisis in democracy also perhaps, can this multi-crisis perhaps unlock underlying dynamics of democratization? And so that's what we'll be examining today with 5 speakers. So we have lined up first Signe Hatzo, who is the Deputy Director General at the European Commission's Director General for Research and Innovation. We've also got Joachim Ott, who is head of the unit responsible for citizens dialogue, so for also at the European Commission. Then Professor Johannes Vogel, who is our science and society expert in the room today. He is a man of many titles, among which he's Director General of the Museum of Natural History at the Leibniz Institute in Berlin. He's also Professor of Biodiversity at the Humboldt University in Berlin and President of the European Citizen Science Association. We've also got with us today Antoine Vergne, who is co-director of Mission Publique, a social enterprise whose mission is to bring citizens' voices into policymaking, and Anthony Zakrzewski, who is President and Director General of Democratic Society, and his organization's mission is to help governments listen to people. So quite the right people to have in the room for the topic of the day, and I'm very grateful to them all. So what can you expect from this session? Well, we're going to hear from the institutional speakers from the European Commission who will be telling us what is planned in terms of including citizens' voices into EU policymaking. Then we'll hear from the NGO, social entrepreneur, academic among our panelists telling us their ideal vision of what could and should happen. And finally, we'll be hearing from you, telling us your vision and setting your questions to the panelists to get a dialogue going here. Now, you should all see at the bottom of your screens, and if you tap your screen, if you're on mobile devices, a Q&A button, and that is where we will be gathering your questions. So if you have questions for the panelists, please put them on the Q&A button at any time during the session. We'll be opening the floor to these questions and setting them to the panelists after their opening speaking points. And to the panelists, I just want to say that you too can look at the Q&A button at any time you choose. And if you want, you could start answering questions in writing or wait for the oral Q&A section at the end. Now, first, I want to get a temperature of, we're going to hear the panelist vision, but I also want to hear the vision for the future of the participants in the room. So Mateusz is going to put a link to Slido, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with by now, in the chat. There it is. So please click on that link. And I want you, in that link, you've got 25 characters to say what is your vision for citizen engagement post-COVID. What do you hope to see? What do you want to see? What do you think could and should be done? So just please, you've got 30 seconds because we'd like this to appear now to gauge the temperature in the room. Just tell us what your vision for citizen engagement is. In fact, I'll open the link myself and join in because it's a topic I too feel very passionate about. Okay, I see things popping up. The key word that is happening right now is transformation. There's also clearly a desire in the room for more two-way dialogue, more diversity of engagement, an inclusive and holistic approach. Digital is coming up quite a bit. Responsible research and innovation, and that's good because we definitely have two excellent speakers on research and innovation here. Hybrid participation, yes, this is something that the current COVID crisis has certainly taught us to do more of. Openness, yeah, again, going digital, new wave of deliberation, fantastic. I don't know, can we, Mateusz, can we see the results of the word cloud on the screen, perhaps? No. Well, we see it now.
Yes, 1 second. I'm just putting it on.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh, and in the time that put up, so inclusiveness is really the key word of the day, and I think that that's a great, yeah, open governance, fantastic. Trust, inclusiveness, transformation are keywords of the day. So I would like the panelists to keep those in mind as they give us their opening statements. And I'd like now to invite Signorazzo to open her mic and to tell us how the EU's research and innovation actions and policy are going to support this very necessary citizen engagement post-COVID for the transformative and inclusive dialogues that this room apparently wants to see. Signe, over to you.
Okay, good afternoon to all the participants. I can see that there are more than 40 participants who have joined us for this session, and it was great to see the word like trust and inclusiveness really as coming out very clearly out of the discussion. And certainly now that we are in the COVID-19, well, still in the pandemic crisis, because now we are having the second wave in many of the countries. Well, certainly trust in society, trust in each other, and also the need really to be inclusive in our policies are really the words of the day. So I'm really happy to be speaking to you today at this Festival for Citizen Engagement, because the place that I work for, the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation, stands for innovation not only in science and technology, but also in democracy and civic participation. Civic participation is a fast-moving field. We have seen spontaneous movements emerge, such as the youth movements for climate and democratic innovations, which take hold, such as citizens' assemblies or participatory budgets in cities like Paris, Madrid, and actually many others. The COVID-19 pandemic crisis is continuously demonstrating the extent to which science and innovation policy needs to be at the core of exchanges between citizens and governments through a participatory policy process. And it forms only part of the multi-crisis we are facing, along with the climate crisis and the inevitable economic crisis resulting from this pandemic. And this is why we intend to rise to the challenge in the next coming years. Our actions will support innovations in Europe. They will support civic participation at exactly the time when it is needed. Indeed, there is no getting out of the climate crisis or the crisis in trust or the impeding economic crisis if we do not act with as well as for European citizens. And we will really use this full strength of EU's research and innovation funding to support innovative projects that empower citizens and that empower citizens on projects and areas that really matter to the people. First of all, the climate crisis will require much of all of us. Even after the COVID, we can cope with the COVID crisis, the climate crisis will still be there. And we know that we cannot achieve the necessary climate transition without our citizens on board. And this is why my DG has just launched a call for innovative projects that will empower citizens as we move forward with the EU's Green Deal to make our economy sustainable. We are already receiving dozens of proposals, and we will select those that present the highest quality for projects that will allow really European citizens to join in citizen deliberations on the Green Deal, and the projects that will enable citizens to act on climate change and to act through education, citizen science, and civic engagement. Now, under the next framework program for research and innovation, once our member states have approved the EU's next 7-year budget, we are very hopeful, looking forward to this week's discussions in the European Council. Then we are also poised to launch another call, and this one will be for research and innovation projects focused on opening up traditional institutions of representative democracy and increased trust in democratic governance, and to do that through a direct participatory process. So my Director General doesn't just fund participatory and deliberative processes in Europe. We also try to walk the talk of citizen engagement, namely by co-creating our own policy objectives with European citizens. We have done this in the priority phase of our research and innovation missions. We had another session, glad to see some participants also here in this session on missions and namely the citizen engagement in the missions. As part of that, from June to October, the groups of citizens had the meetings with the mission boards, namely to reap also their ideas, their input into the missions, just to see that really the mission topics are the ones that speak to the citizens, that are important and close to the citizens' heart. They have responded, so indicating that we should strive 5 ambitious targets by 2030, namely to foster 100 climate neutral cities in Europe, to save 3 million lives that would otherwise be lost to cancer, to prepare Europe for the inevitable climate disruptions and accelerate transformations in our society, and to restore degraded marine freshwater ecosystems, and to make at least 75% of all soils in the EU healthy for food, for people, for nature and climate. These are clearly ambitious targets. And now we are waiting for the green light for the College of Commissioners to start working towards meeting these targets. But certainly we will not stop here. We will also continue to engage with the citizens in the phase of the implementation, but also in their assessment. And we do this out of the deep belief that we cannot take public policy actions that they really need to deeply concern our citizens, and without ensuring that their voices are heard. So proud as I am of our efforts, I'm sure that my fellow panelists will have their own ideas for how best to do that. And I look forward to hearing their vision, their proposed actions for citizen engagement in post-COVID world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Signe. So message received loud and clear. The EU's research and innovation action is there to support civic participation and and your DG is, as you say, walking the talk and engaging with citizens to develop its own policy. So now I'd like to turn to Joachim Ott from the European Commission's Unit for Citizens Dialogues, whose responsibility is to engage in these two-way dialogues that our participants would like to see more of, so that he can tell us what are your plans, what can we expect in the next couple of years on how the EU will directly engage with citizens. Joachim?
Thanks so much, Nora. Thanks so much for the invitation to this panel. And indeed, thanks so much for the great idea to start this session with your Slido survey, because if I just take note of the three main points that came out of this, these were exactly those points that I wanted to start with. When we talk about the future of citizens engagement, of course, my first look would go back. So what were the challenges of citizens engagement, how we practiced it in the past? These challenges have been essentially twofold. On one hand, it was that we had a tendency to talk to ourselves, or in principle to people to whom we talk anyway all the time. And the second one, that it was very difficult to show the impact that these conversations had on the way how policy is made at the European level. Our approach to encounter these challenges have been, of course, on one hand, that we tried to go as territorial in the region as much as possible, that we try to involve social media, that we try to create some leverage through media reporting and media engagement, and then that at least towards 2018, 2019, we also had at the overall level the possibility to bring in a citizens' perspective into the college and partly to the European Council. Now, from that, what we would like to build and what we are going under the Brandmark Conference on the Future of Europe, try to set up now from the coming days or weeks. So that depends for the time being a little bit when the three institutions, Parliament, Commission, Council, come to a conclusion, is a way to engage that's built around 7 basic ideas. First idea, and that's a call that we have heard from many of you, also from my co-panelists, work not only with those who walk in, work with randomly selected audiences. This is something that we are going to do. Try to get out of the national perspective and work with transnational or pan-European panels. Have a focus, a clear focus on what you talk, so not just a question and answer session, but a focus that's based also on information provided through experts. They can be partly external experts, can be experts from the institutions, and give time for deliberation. So from a format that used to be 90 minutes into something that's at least half a day, but rather more a day or even 2 days. We have to do that clearly in partnership with member states and civil society. And all of these things we tried. We tried, we had exploratory pilots on that just lately, end of October, together with the Bertelsmann Foundation. And interestingly, this works also purely online. We will have, and that's then in particular on the impact side, we will have a systematic analysis of what comes out of these conversations, be it online or on site. And we will have a multilingual digital platform as the federating hub that brings together all forms of engagement, those by the Commission, those by the other institutions, those by partners and third parties. And maybe to come to a last word, I'm very sure we have now worked in my own department and probably also in many of your departments, purely online over the last 9 months. There is a hunger to go back also physically on site. So I guess what we are going to have is hybrid formats, surely, from the moment that it's possible, but then also strong on-site events with concrete people that come together to deliberate, and a strong online presence. That would be my input to you, and of course, I'm eager then to get into a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great. So I mean, you ticked a lot of the boxes indeed that were on the word cloud. You're telling us that the future will be about inclusiveness and hybrid formats, that you've piloted these. That's I think going to be good news for the people listening to us. And now I'd like to turn to Antoine Vergne. So you've heard what our speakers from inside the European Commission have told you about what is planned, and I'd like to hear from you, because I know you've been running your own formats, and so you probably have recommendations on methods and topics based on your own experience, but I'd really like to ask you, you've heard Joachim and Signe, what is planned, where can we go further, according to you?
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I share my screen. I will do a postorama and futurama because we will go back in time and then forward in time. And my name is Antoine. I'm working at Mission Publique since 2011. But actually, I'm interested in citizens' engagement and random selection politics in particular since 1999. That's we go back 20 years in time. And I will share with you something I never shared before, and that's something I wrote as I was 19 student in Toulouse, and I wrote that. So on the left upside, what you can see is the blue one. It says, big day today, I found the form of government, and it's called virtual Topocracy. So it was very naive, very, very young from me. On the right side, you see how the institutional design of this system looks like. It's a mix of direct democracy, online democracy, random selection, and representative democracy. So it was all mixed. And below the photo below is the action plan. So it's part 2. It's called Go and Let's Act. So that was 1999. Now go back to 2020. A lot has happened since then. So a lot of things that has made this utopian vision more real, and a lot that seems it's very far and farther than ever. The me from today is quite impressed, actually, I must say, at the pace of the progress and the many improvements we have had in that domain since 20 years. We have had global deliberations on climate, on the internet. We have seen deliberative democracy at national scale with high impact and a direct link to direct or representative democracy. We have also deliberative democracy at the European level starting to flourish and to be experimented. Of course, at the same time, I'm worried about the challenges that we have faced and that we face. Of course, loss of trust in politics. So that's one of the words, trust in the word cloud. The polarization, bringing difficulty with inclusion, of course, and the global catastrophes and challenges we have. But as we are today talking about the future and the futurama, I'd like to bring you with me in 2040. So meaning now we are going 20 years in the future. And I'd like to share with you what I am seeing there in 20 years from now. I see the first thing, so let's welcome in 2040. The first thing I see is that is Brussels. Brussels in 2040 or 50, maybe 60. And it's, as you see, quite green. It's a vegetated city. This picture has been done by Luc Scoyten, and Luc Scoyten is someone we work with at Mission Publique when it comes to see the future. And we have worked with him to develop what we call the architecture of deliberation. So in 2040, the first thing I see is there is an architecture of participation and deliberation. So what we need to do, so these are traditional places for deliberation. On the left side, you have the Amazon. People from Amazonas, they are gathering this kind of common house and talking with another. On the right side, it's the traditional Iraqi place for deliberation. And below you have an African palabre tree. So what we need from now to 2040 is to develop this architecture of deliberation. And we have started to work on that with Luc Scoyten and to develop what could be a a place for deliberation. These are the first schemes you see there, but we are working on that. And I think it could be a very good thing to integrate in the European Bauhaus that has been launched by the President of the Commission. That could be fantastic to test on that thing. So the second thing I see in 2040 is hybridation. Of course, we have talked about that, but it's not only about online and face-to-face. It's about synchronous and asynchronous, and it's more than that. It's hybrids between deliberative democracy and representative democracy, between direct democracy and deliberative democracy. So it's kind of this combinatory system of tools of decision-making with impact and power. So what we need to do after this, for this second point, okay, I had a picture of that, is we need to ensure that we work at meta level, that we make sure that those processes are highly deliberative, inclusive. We have that in the word cloud, and can be compared. So what we need to do is build bridges, and those bridges are legal bridges between a deliberative format and a parliament, for example. What happens when a citizens' assembly has done its job? Or, for example, between a parliament and a referendum, we already have that, but we need to build those legal bridges between the parts of those institutional designs. What we need to build also are cultural bridges between the bureaucrats, civil society and researchers, between advocates of deliberative democracy, direct democracy, and representative democracy, so that we build that ecosystem. So what I see as the third development is deliberation 2.0. Maybe in 20 years it will be 4.0 or 5.0. We don't know. But what does it mean? It means that deliberation will include a strong focus on values. That's the work that's been done in Australia with by the people at Canberra University, showing how important it is to work on values for deliberation. It will also integrate elements of virtual reality. But we can also think about having artificial intelligence sitting at the table. Why not helping citizens with data evaluation with machine learning? And why not having representatives of the planet at the table? We know, so on the right, you have this Colombian case making Amazon one of the subject of rights. So why not having the nature at the table of discussion? And that's something that will happen in the 20 years. What we need with that in those deliberation new formats is to speak about impact. So Joachim, you have said that is the impact. And that I see as the fourth trend, and that's the building of coalitions. It means that all stakeholders, not only the public authorities, will be on board of the design and preparations of those deliberative processes, because they all have an interest in the results and in getting good decisions, funded discussion, informed discussions. So it's not only the elected officials that have that need or the bureaucrats, it's everyone. So that's the building of coalitions. That's what we've been doing with the Global Dialogue on Internet, building a coalition of different stakeholders to launch and steer the process of deliberation. Last thing, I see a shift towards institutionalization, but I don't see it as we may think. I think it's not having a service or a direction or something like that for citizen participation or a law regulation. I think it will at some point be more part of the toolbox of decision making, something like opinion polls, expertise, or the view of organized interest. It will be one of the pillar of decision making process. And by institutionalization, I think it means that at some point we will be in a position to activate crisis deliberation. So it's an oxymoron, but it's the fact that you have a crisis, you activate deliberation. That's what we see now with first formats on COVID-19 being deployed. But at the moment, it takes a lot of time between the fact that saying we need a deliberation and making the deliberation. I think in the 20 years to come, we'll have ready to go formats, preparedness in order to activate deliberation. There is one major precondition for that, that is that we create a status for for participating citizens. Citizens, like in the Athenian citizens in the Athenian democracy, had a system of obolus. So it was this piece of money that they had to attend the People's Assembly, so they didn't have to work during that day. And we need to recreate that in a way on the basis of the juror system or on the long life learnings vacations. So something that free citizens for their citizens' time. That's something I think that is a very strong precondition for the future. So based on that, and that will be my conclusion, I think that the European Commission should take the lead and become the champion of deliberation for 2040. And maybe it's the sixth mission that you have to fulfill. So what does it mean for the years to come? Invest in the architecture and build the first deliberative building. You would be the first, world's first to do that. So this is for the Bauhaus program. Then invest in the testing and improvement of hybrids formats. This is what Ratso, you've said about the program to come. I think there is a lot to test, a lot to understand what are the variables of those hybrid formats. Then I think there is a need to create a tool for crisis deliberation. So Joachim, this is more for you. Have something ready, ready to go, ready to fly. I think another thing is to support the discussion on the quality of deliberation and institutionalization. And the last thing I think is that you should launch coalitions of stakeholders in order to tackle the key challenges facing humanity. And I think the Conference on the Future is one of the best points to start. So I can now come back in 2020 and thank you very much for your attention. And I'm happy for the discussion that is going to come.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Antoine, for helping us to dream of a vision in the slightly far off future of 2040. I love that. It's so good to take a further look than the immediate, next couple of years perspective. I really got a sense of building in all of your proposals. With the Bauhaus is about building better, building new. You talked about building legal bridges between different parts of this deliberative architecture, building cultural bridges, building coalitions in order to have impact. And so I'd like to stay with this theme of building, maybe, as I hand over to our next speaker, Professor Johannes Vogel, who's our science and society expert, and ask him, what is your vision in order to build trust in science this time? We've seen it sorely tested recently. So what's your vision for building trust in science through citizen engagement? And before Professor Vogel takes the floor, I'd really like to ask all of you who are listening to just ask us your questions. Click the Q&A button that you see at the bottom of your screens and tell us, what questions do you have? Write them there. We want to hear them. Anyway, Professor Vogel, over to you.
So thank you very much. All the talks thus far have been really inspiring, and it's just fantastic to see the energy we all want to put into this, because I find it quite interesting that, Antoine, it's fantastic talk, but you said something like, when the crisis start, we need to start deliberating, or need to be ready to be deliberating. The crisis is now, and I don't think that in our lifetime we will stop deliberating or accelerating deliberation, because this is probably only the first of a long line of challenges humanity will have to face. I think there are many stakeholders with entrenched views in this game that need to change. And while one can't focus on every individual stakeholder, I would like to select for me and for my vision changing science, because science is very entrenched and too inward looking in its approach, and has been. If you want to strive for excellence, you cannot neglect relevance. And I would even argue that if you focus on relevance, you might even become more excellent. And this game between freedom and responsibility, between excellence and relevance, needs to be readjusted. I'm an evolutionary biologist, and one of the things that you learn very early on is that there's either deep change or slow death. And what I think we are talking about here is whether the European knowledge system or the system of enlightenment we've all love and really appreciate is up for deep change, or the other not so nice option. So science needs to change. Science and participation need to be reconsidered. We need to find completely new ways for co-production and listening. And for all of that, you need a purpose. And for me, there is no bigger and better purpose than expressed by the Sustainable Development Goals, which will allow mankind to thrive on a planet together with nature, and not like we've done in the last 500 years, fighting against nature. So in order to do that, the resource flow into science needs to change completely. At the moment, all we are doing is giving money to find yet another solution to another interesting question. I think at least 20% of scientists' time all over the EU need to be spent on engaging with society. So one day a week, we go out and learn to listen and try to reflect on the way how we talk, how we think, how we act, and how we want to contribute to a greater good, for example, delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. So in Germany, country I now live in, we have 500,000 people being employed in science. We have another 500,000 that work in the field of science as, for example, amateur experts or citizen scientists. So that's 1 million out of 80 million. If we all spend one day talking and listening to society, I think the figures reported in the press today that only 54% of Germans want to take up vaccination might be much higher. So it's not for us to blame the citizens that they don't trust science. It's perhaps looking at scientists and seeing what they can do better so that more people trust, that more people feel included, that more people feel that there is a sense for transformation with them and for them. And somebody has to give, and I doubt that it will be society. But I hope that science has the strength within it to change and thereby make the contribution that is so desperately needed for a sustainable future. So I would argue science has to get off its track of slow death and join a broader coalition for deep change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Vogel. I heard a very bold recommendation there to have 1 day a week scientists go forth to listen and engage with society. For me, as a civil servant in the European Commission, this raises the questions of, well, how about asking civil servants to take up the same challenge? That's possibly something that our institutional panelists can comment on in the Q&A session. Great, and so now I'd like to turn to our final opening comments from our final panelist of the day, Anthony Zakarzewski of Democratic Society. You've heard what is being planned. You've heard now 2 series of bold visions, one about the architecture of governance and one about how science can prevent its slow death and connect with society. And so I'd like to hear your vision now for the future. What is your dream and your bold recommendation.
Thank you very much, Nora. I think the thing that really strikes me about the two things we've heard so far, about Antoine's vision and Johannes's comments, is that they are really about remaking the way in which decisions are made. They're really fundamental and they're groundbreaking about the way in which the organizations, the systems which deliver governance in this world can be remade from the ground up. And I think that's absolutely the place that we're at the minute. I think that's exactly the sort of vision that is needed. And perhaps because I'm normally the big visionary, it would be good to focus on some of the challenges on the other side of that big vision. So in particular, I think there is, I remember saying when Trump was first elected, that it felt a bit like when you're on a train and you're reading a book and you get so absorbed in the book, you look up and you suddenly realize you're at your station. It wasn't that you weren't expecting to get there in the end, it's just that you thought you had a bit more time. And I still feel that the last 4 years of Trump, and obviously we've had Brexit as well, have been a period where some of the really fundamental principles about where we thought we were 10 years ago have been challenged, not in ways that we couldn't have imagined in 1999 in Toulouse, in Antoine's case, or in the mid-90s in London in my case. We did imagine them. We thought that this current governance system was not working well, that government was not keeping up with the way in which society was developing, particularly with the rise of the information society. And so we've ended up at a place where we are trying to claw back a sense of control of our destiny, a sense of being able to make those changes at a timetable that works. And I think that the visions and some of the work that's been going on with the pilots that we've been talking about, the Conference on the Future of Europe and other things, are all really important contributions to achieving that goal, to really being successful in it. But I don't want to imply that success is guaranteed. I feel like there are, we have spent the last kind of few years being chased along a narrow ridge by a hungry dog, and it's very steep on both sides, and the dog is pretty fast. So we have to be faster. And in particular, we have to understand how some of these things that have been experiments up till now, some of the things that have been quite small scale, quite off on the edge that people don't need to worry about, are able to transition into things that really have power and deliberation and decision making within them. And as soon as you do that, you start drawing attention to the process. I know that Antoine was heavily involved in the Convention Citoyenne in France, which was a really excellent example of what you can do with a really big, ambitious vision. And I know that the Conference on the Future of Europe forthcoming has drawn heavily from some of that thinking. What's also really noticeable is that the release of the recommendations from the Convention almost felt political. There was definitely an edge to some of the commentary. There was definitely a sense in which people were starting to treat these processes not as kind of interesting, useful, very valuable things, but also as political players in their own right. And I celebrate that because I think it's absolutely what needs to happen. But I also understand, as someone who's worked in and around politics my entire career, that being the focus of political attention is not necessarily a very pleasant place to be. It's not a very pleasant place to be for the citizens who are involved, and it's not a very pleasant place to be for the people who are designing those processes. So my vision for the future is absolutely aligned, I think, with what Antoine and Johannes have said. It is absolutely aligned, I think, with the direction I see the European Commission and other governments around Europe taking, but it's also not easy to get to because it involves not just building the physical spaces for deliberation that Antoine has talked about. It involves not just rewiring the way in which science treats democracy and participation, as Johannes has talked about. It also involves changing the processes, the decision-making structures, and the incentives of institutions that have been set up to hold and look after political power for years. And when I say look after political power, I mean that in two ways. I mean, first, that the power that the state has always needed to be checked by judges, by laws, by processes that can appear kind of quite boring and quite quite reserved and quite slow, but which are essential to ensure fairness. So we need to preserve those while also ensuring that the voice of citizens is involved in the way in which their decisions are taken in a much more long-term, much more extensive way than it has been in the past. So as well as guarding power by ensuring fair process, these institutions have guarded power by holding onto it and not letting anyone else have it. And we need to make sure that we're opening up those processes in ways that allow the politicians, the decision makers, the power holders to come along with the process and to see that it's a better way forward, and to see that it's something that they can get advantage out of as much as they could get advantage out of the old system. I think that's not actually a very easy thing to do. I think it's possible. I think it might need a new generation of political and organizational leaders who I know now are growing and stepping into some of those roles. But we also need, in society as a whole, the institutional capacity to engage. So it isn't just that everyone in government or everyone in decision-making institutions needs to think in a different way. We also need to have the mechanisms and the structures and the active citizens to be able to engage in those processes. Otherwise, we will end up concentrating the voices of the people who are most ready and most able to participate and ignoring the rest. You know, I was involved in in this work, in my current work, Democratic Society. It's very early days, work during the Big Society wave in the UK. And for those of you who don't remember, which is probably most of you, Big Society was an initiative by the Cameron government to try and break down kind of big government and big corporations and turn things over to society and social enterprise and civic bodies. And its fundamental flaw was not that is a bad idea in itself, but that it wasn't backed by capacity building, and it wasn't backed by any kind of extending of that decision-making capacity to wider audiences. So what happened was, rather than having your local park or local public service be run by councillors who you elected or council staff who were responsible to people who you elected, they were run by the Friends of the Park or by a local civil society group who decided that they were in charge of it. And actually that reduced democracy and it reduced civic engagement in places where those organizations weren't run well. So that capacity and that readiness to engage is really important. And I think that where Europe has to help at the constructive level is by building on some of the tools it's already created. Consul and Decidim come from European projects and are now very successful digital engagement tools. A lot of the work that is being done through Horizon Europe is focusing on building up civic and democratic infrastructure, and think about how tools such as the Conference on the Future of Europe, but also work on the Green Deal, can be connected with national and local action to create that kind of infrastructure that Antoine was dreaming about in 1999, and that I've been thinking about, when many people like us have been thinking about for a long time. Because, and I'm going to wind up with this and let the discussion go wider, it feels like this is the point at which people like me, who have had a good story to tell about democracy for the last 20 years, are really going to be asked to put their abilities and reputation on the line and really make some change happen in ways that fundamentally challenge the ways in which decisions have been taken up till now, fundamentally challenge people who are holding power structures. And I think that's something that can only be done as an alliance. I don't feel that any of us have the strength to do this alone. I think it needs the bringing together of civil society, of organizations, of structuring democratic infrastructure organizations like Mission Publique and DemSoc, and also those people within institutions who are seeking those changes, whether politicians or officials. I think that alliance can make change happen. But we have to recognize that, much like the EU, which is trying to build something better through a process of 60, 70 years of deep political innovation and slow change, this work possibly doesn't have 60 or 70 years, but is the same kind of deep level political and democratic innovation, and really does need a broad coalition to build it. So I'm really glad to be here and to be speaking with friends here, but I'm also really conscious that the task for 2021 is to go out into the world and speak to those people who don't yet think about this way of working as a default, and start building some of those connections and coalitions.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you, everyone. I see that questions are flying in and also being answered quite rapidly in our Q&A button. The first question that was asked, and I see that Antoine has already answered it, but I'd like to set it perhaps to other panelists. How can we support this joined up approach across Europe to break up the silos, national silos in institutions, silos at the level of discipline? And I was wondering, Joachim, you say you ran pilots recently that you hope to extend in the Conference on the Future of Europe. Could you expand a bit more on how you can envisage at this moment, very concretely, breaking up the silos that Alina mentions?
I wanted to say a word also on that. Indeed, it sounds banal, but one of the biggest problems has been indeed that if we want to have a European debate, we cannot do that only in the national context. No? It needs to be done with people coming from across the EU, and that means multilingualism. Otherwise, it gets a completely elite thing, as actually we are doing it here, because we do it in English, we do it on Zoom. That's not a real debate that would involve citizens from society in all its diversity. This goes hand in hand with the idea that we say if we want to open up our focus, then indeed we need random selection. We need a form of getting people who would normally not be interested in engaging with us, or we with them. Insofar, this step that of course makes it a bit more exclusive, as you go to a polling agency, you ask them to find 200 people, 300 people that reflect Europe in its diversity, is something else than just saying, okay, we have an open process, please join in. So these two elements I would see mostly. Then I don't know whether you want to go immediately to the second question, or whether we should leave the possibility.
I wanted to jump from. I wanted to jump from that actually to, I see Wolfgang has a question about capacity building. And in a way, I wish that Wolfgang could pipe up right now and tell us whether what you've just described responds to the capacity building that he's asking for in his question. But instead, I wanted Antoine and Anthony, if one after the other, you could follow on from what Joachim just told us and discuss, whether we are approaching the capacity building, the infrastructure that we need, and that Wolfgang is asking for in his question. And if not, what more could be done that you can see? Antoine, then Anthony, please.
No, I think so. I have the deep feeling that this is the right thing to do. If we want to scale the processes and the fact that you have more and more experience on deliberative democracy, you need a kind of like in maybe in the 90s to create chairs that were on climate. So you had this both research and action and people being formed to that. In France, we now have since 5 or 10 years a master specialized on deliberation and deliberative democracy. And what you see is that people are coming then out of that with that knowledge, and they can enter the society and go and work, and it's changing a lot. So I think having that kind of European Academy of deliberation would be a fantastic thing to do.
Anthony?
Can I just interject there?
Oh yeah, please.
I'm not really an expert in this, but I think there has been a very interesting experiment in Sweden in the late 30s, where they basically immunized the entire country against Nazism, where every young citizen was brought into, I think in Antoine's words, deliberation camps or deliberation schools. And that helped Sweden to actually come out of the war, I think, as one of the strongest economies and strongest democracies. I suspect it's all slipping now because these active efforts to actually bring people closer to what democracy and participation means for them need to be done. We've taken things for granted and let things slip. And science as a self-referential system is being interested in itself and not in its wider mission. I'm sort of being quite stark here, and yes, I'm taking this as one of the examples of democratic institutions that, in my opinion, need deep change. But I think it's exemplary for others, and we need to perhaps really look at this Swedish experiment and see what we can do. Because if we want to get hold of the challenges, if we want to address the challenges the world is facing on the environmental or on the health front, only democracy and deliberation will deliver that for us. I can't see any other system or approach that will help us.
And I wonder.
Go on, Nora.
I was just I'm sorry, Anthony, but listening to Professor Fogel, I was just wondering if one version of these deliberation, well, camps is a word I have an issue with, but could be what another one of our participants, Lyndon, suggested, which is participation in deliberations as jury duty. But sorry, Anthony, yes, please tell us more about capacity building and networks and how we can increase trust and confidence.
So I think there's several different things to the part of this. I absolutely agree, as someone said in the questions, that you need capacity building on both sides, and that capacity isn't just about like the physical number of people that you have. It's actually about the confidence and skills that you have as well. And that's something that we need in citizens. It's something that you need in decision makers as well. I think the 2 points I'd add to this are, not all decisions are taken by government, and I think that if we make the deliberative process just about those things that have .gov or .eu in their domain names, we'll miss a huge number of organisations that take decisions that affect people's lives every day. So thinking about how we make this a general cultural shift, I think, is really important. And I think the other thing I worry about, I suppose, is that this becomes something that is a kind of political label. That becomes something that is like whatever the opposite of nationalism is, this is. And I think the risk then is that you create a space in which some people feel like they are enemies of these sorts of processes, or like the processes are on the other side of what they want to be. And I think that is something that we need to work out how to tackle. And I think that mere inclusion isn't enough. It has to be about finding the unifying message that demonstrates to people that this is the way in which all views can be brought in. I still fundamentally believe, and if I'm wrong, the last 20 years of my life has been a total waste. That fundamentally people are not primarily ideological. They are primarily motivated by by lots of different political and philosophical impulses, some of which cut across each other, and which deliberation can help bring out, and can help also identify the existence of those other values in other people, and can build a stronger community. To do that at the scale that Europe needs, though, you also need a phase shift. You need to kind of go through that barrier where people stop thinking primarily as citizens of a particular state, and start thinking as people who are part of a whole ecosystem, which isn't necessarily only European. It can be global, it can be local, but that people have a sense of themselves operating at multiple different levels. I don't think at the moment the civic education that we have, even in places that do it well, really embeds that kind of thinking. So there is definitely something that we need to do to create the structures, the language, the behaviors, beyond the kind of physical spaces, the mental spaces, which enable us to operate on those multiple levels. And I think that's a 20-30 year transition, but we really do need to get started now.
Okay, I'm super conscious of the time. We have 1 minute left. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists in turn. Imagine you have been named the von der Leyen's chief advisor for the Bauhaus project. What is your first action? What are you going to launch for the new Bauhaus if you were directing it? Signe, you first. What would be your vision for the new European Bauhaus?
Well, actually, I was very rich discussions, and I think what I really need to do is to institutionalize these processes, and also have a change of culture so that citizen engagement will actually be inherently part of decision-making process. I would suggest that.
Great. Joachim, you're next.
Well, if it's Bauhaus, then I have to, of course, to start with form follows function. We need to find the right instruments for the right ends. And that is what Antoine very nicely described as building the bridges between the two systems. Because just allow me that I saw it in one of the questions that we didn't raise yet. Europe is in the hand of the citizens, and they decide something differently. Europe is in the hand of the citizens.
Yeah,
it's already now. We have a parliament, and what we need to do is simply we need to get our act together in order to give the best instruments in the hands of those who make the decisions.
Professor Vogel, what is your action when you get to lead the new European Bauhaus? What do you launch?
Very, very fortunate. Last year, the German Parliament and the city of Berlin awarded me enough money to completely reimagine my natural history museum. And that's exactly, so I've learned a lot today, and you can all become part of using the billion I now have to build exactly that by 2030.
That is a challenge that is very attractive indeed. Antoine?
Then I would start working with Johannes and build the European Academy of Deliberation in front of the Natural History Museum, and it would be the first building with deliberative setting, and we could build it between the Chancellery and the Parliament in Berlin. There is a place here.
Yes.
Let's do that.
Yes, yes.
Fantastic. The networking is already happening. And Anthony, same question.
I would seek to build a module or a space that could be used in a library or another public building, of which there are many common examples across Europe, that could be the European space that could get people thinking at a European local level in a physical environment.
All right. Well, now the challenge is to all of us who've heard these ideas to see what we can do to make them happen. We've gone 2 minutes over time. I do apologize, but I'd like to ask all our participants, if you care to stick around after this panel. We'll be screening 2 very short 3-minute movies, which are part of our virtual gallery walk. They're movies from various NGOs presenting their work and their projects in citizen engagement. Very short and sure to be enriching. And with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for making us dream, for showing us a possible vision, and I feel much more energized now having heard this to carry this work forward. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you very much for the moderation and the invitation.
Many thanks, Nora. All panelists. Many thanks. Bye-bye.
People's History Museum has been in Manchester for 30 years and we've been in this building for 10. And I think as a location for the National Museum of Democracy, there couldn't be a better place in the country. Manchester's always been that hotbed of radical ideas, of progressive movements. We've got a big programme theme which is all about migrations. So really trying to talk about the importance of a multicultural society and celebrating the diversity that we have in Manchester, but also in the UK more widely.
Our approach is completely community-led. So we've recruited a community programme team, which is made up of 6 people whose lives have been shaped by migration, and each of them are bringing their different unique perspectives on the subject. Migration is a really difficult topic to explore, but what I've taken away from it is that there's positives as well as the negatives that we hear about it. And what's been a real privilege is to be able to hear those first-hand stories of both sides of migration.
As one of the partners of Culture Labs, we launched More in Common projects, which takes inspiration from Jo Cox. Jo was a member of Parliament and was driven by her belief that a fairer, kinder, and a more tolerant world was possible. In her first speech in Parliament, she said,
"We are far more united and have far more in common than that which divides us."
Sadly, on the 16th of June 2016, Jo was murdered because of her beliefs. Jo's legacy continues to inspire people around the world, and we at the People's History Museum invited people to join us to carry Jo's banner of love, as now more than ever, Britain needs to embrace, celebrate, and find strength in its diversity. Over 30 people from different backgrounds who made Manchester their home came together to share knowledge, experiences, and conversations. We've been working together in a co-creative process, reflecting on what it means to live in a multicultural society. It wasn't very easy to reach out to such a diverse spectrum of participants, but being an organization whose past, present and future is led by the engagement of its communities was key to success. Our gatherings were directly affected by the pandemic. We found ourselves in isolation in the time everyone was eager to meet each other. As we continue to meet virtually, we are looking forward to the time we can meet face-to-face in our museum.
Today in 2020, with all that's going around us in the UK and globally with democratic engagement, it feels like we've never been more relevant. I feel very hopeful that museums have a really important role to play in bringing people together in a space where they can be creative, they can explore those ideas, and they can think about the future world that they want to live in.
Our society, our planet, is facing great challenges such as social injustice, the climate crisis, COVID-19, and we need to address the question of how we want to live in the digital future. These are very complex challenges. They pose problems that we can only solve together. We need ideas to find solutions for these challenges. What is an idea? An idea is a conceptual construct, a thought that can change the present and the future. For an idea to materialize and to ultimately become an innovation, this idea needs fuel. People are the fuel for ideas. Everyone has knowledge that can help solve a problem. In our imagination, this knowledge works like a gear wheel. Innovation is a mechanism that consists of different gear wheels. Often only a small gear wheel would be needed to complement the whole machinery. But looking for the missing gear wheel is like looking for a needle in a haystack. How long would it take a single person to find this needle? Long. How long would it take by two people? Half as long. And so on and so on. This is the idea of Open Innovation Salzburg. Open Innovation Salzburg aims to create a pool of knowledge that connects different ideas from different people, institutions and companies from the Salzburg region. Through specific competitions, ideas and solutions are collected and made accessible to the society. This creates the possibility that some of the former competitors become partners. Likewise, citizens enter into exchange with institutions and companies and thus create points of interaction. Companies can thus fall back on a large pool of ideas and innovation and maybe find their gear wheel. This initiative also invites citizens to actively participate in shaping the regional economy. Even the smallest idea can be the solution to a big problem. Open Innovation Salzburg does not see innovation as a linear process, but encourages people to work together openly to shape our present. The philosopher John Rawls presented the following thought experiment in his theory of justice. If people had to design a society without knowing what tasks, assets or social status they would then actually live in, the constructed society would be designed in such a way that injustice doesn't exist. Nobody would design a society in which he or she would later then be disadvantaged. The challenge of open innovation is to bring these people together and create a space in which ideas can develop. Participation in the form of open innovation is key. Our future will be made fairer by solving problems in a joint process.